You guys might remember in this video when I talked about numerous examples where a player came in and eventually stole the spotlight away from another player, something that can definitely be a tough pill to swallow for certain individuals. And today we got 3 more examples where something like that happened, where a player tried to hang onto their spot as long as possible, but someone else's shadow was just too big. If I were to tell you that once upon a time there was a shooting guard who played for the Lakers during the mid-90s, made multiple all-star teams, had his very own commercials, and was a fan favorite who everybody loved, you would probably think I was talking about Kobe Bryant. I mean, yeah, he did fit that description to a T as well, but so did Eddie Jones, who was everything I just listed before Kobe came along. They played together for about 3 seasons back in the late 90s. Same position, same height and weight, and even had similar playing styles as well, which is why people question Jerry West for choosing a player with nearly the same exact skill set as Jones. Jones was drafted by the Lakers in 1994 and was expected to be a very important component to the franchise's future. Even when Shaq and Kobe arrived in LA in 1996, Jones was still considered to be a key member of their roster and actually made the All-Star team that year too with Shaq, but it would only be a matter of time before Kobe would take over. As a rookie, Kobe mostly came off the bench and played limited minutes initially, but as the season went on, those minutes started to go up. In his second season, he began to see even more playing time, and as a result, his points per game average more than doubled that year, but was still a backup for Eddie Jones. Although he didn't really start that much that season for the Lakers, he became the youngest all-star starter in NBA history.
You thinking that Eddie Jones and Nick Van Exel and Shaq, they automatically finna make the all-star game, and you make it too.
It was a huge honor. Like when you see the votes tallying up, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm a starter on this team? I only start on my own team, you know?
Kobe's 15 points per game was the highest of any non-starter that season, and was the runner-up for the 6th Man of the Year award. Then, when his 3rd season in the league came along, the Lakers pretty much knew who they were going with, as Jones was traded to the Charlotte Hornets ironically, with Kobe claiming his starting spot. Talk about replacing someone literally. I'll tell you one thing, Tim Legler was not surprised at all that Kobe turned out to be as good as he was.
You'd have 30 guys in the gym, like great pickup games, and I walked in there one day and there's this dude out there and he's like doing pretty ridiculous athletic stuff, playing against Eddie Jones. I'll never forget it. It was an all-star for the Lakers. And, they're going head to head pretty much. And I literally said to the trainer, like, oh, who's that guy? I thought he was going to say, oh, that's such and such. He plays at whatever college, whatever. He's like, oh, that's Kobe Bryant. That's Joe Bryant's son. I'm like, oh, okay. I said, how old is he? He goes, oh, he's 15. He's 15. He's going to Lower Merion. Yeah, they think he's got a chance. I'm like, yeah, I think so.
And here's Nick Van Exel on when he knew Kobe was the real deal.
Probably the second year, because the first year was tough for him because he was getting a lot of playing time, and then Dale was getting a lot of pressure to play Kobe, early on in Kobe's career that first year, but Dale didn't want to do it. He didn't think he was ready, so it was a little struggle for Kobe. But that second year, Kobe really didn't care. Like, he was just like determined. Like, I always say myself, cream gonna rise to the top. Cream gonna rise to the top. And Kobe knew he was that cream. Everybody started to realize, you know what? This boy finna be cold, man.
Eddie Jones was no doubt a great player and resembled Kobe in many ways, but he just couldn't match Kobe when it came to impact on the court. It became evident that Kobe was just more talented and in the end just couldn't compete with him. He had the potential to be an all-time great Laker, but the emergence of Kobe eliminated that possibility. Plus, it's hard to envision the Lakers accomplishing what they did with Eddie Jones as their starting shooting guard instead of Kobe. Now this one's weird because we have a player who stole the spotlight away from another player, but instead of it ending there, the original player was determined to get the spotlight back, essentially replacing the guy who had just briefly replaced him for about a minute, if that makes any sense. You see, Giannis Antetokounmpo was drafted 15th overall by the Milwaukee Bucks in 2013, and after showing some promise his rookie year, the Bucks believed that they might have found their next franchise player. Take a look at this interview when Giannis was invited to the 2014 NBA Draft Lottery to represent them.
What does it mean for you that people are looking at you now as like the face of the franchise for Milwaukee? They selected you to come over here and represent them. What does that mean?
It means a lot. It was a nice gesture from the Bucks and from the owners, to bring me over here. And it was a nice experience for me. and it really means a lot, and I love the Bucks love me too, so it was a nice experience, and I just have fun tonight.
You could tell by the expression on his face that he was excited that people were looking at him in that sort of light. He was up for the challenge, but he must have forgot why he was even at the lottery in the first place. The Bucks were expected to get a pretty high pick that year, which they did. A pick that would immediately make Giannis an afterthought. When the Bucks selected Jabari Parker second overall in the 2014 NBA draft, everyone started to treat him like the face of the franchise, and you couldn't really blame them at the time. Parker was one of the most highly touted prospects to ever come out of Duke. Unlike Giannis, who was relatively unknown when he was drafted, scouts called Jabari a generational talent, and many believed he would be a future perennial all-star. It started to look like that was going to be the case at first, but unfortunately his rookie season was cut short due to him tearing his ACL in his left knee after just 25 games into his career. Not only did he miss the rest of that season obviously, but he would also miss the start of the next season as well. Once he did get back on the court his second season, he played rather well and would go the rest of the year without injury. Then in his third year, he was averaging 20 points per game until he would unfortunately tear his ACL in the same knee once again in early 2017. But once he would recover from that, Giannis Antetokounmpo had already ascended into NBA stardom and was recognized as one of the best players in the league by then. Little did Jabari know that when he was gone, Giannis was motivated to get people saying this again.
People are looking at you now as like the face of the franchise for Milwaukee.
Here's what Giannis said about Jabari starting over him all the way back in Giannis' second season. The number 2 pick Jabari Parker was starting. It was like, oh, okay, I gotta work for my position. When I came in and I made a mistake, I was benched. Oh, they don't love me like they loved me last year. Now I gotta work. Jason Kidd wasn't even trusting me that I could defend guys or that I could make the right play down the stretch. He thought I was a liability. I gotta prove to this guy that I'm not a liability. But as we fast forward back to 2018, Jabari was now the one complaining about lack of playing time. Parker wasn't satisfied with the limited minutes he was receiving during the first round series against Boston. So unsatisfied to the point where he decided to sign with the Chicago Bulls later on that offseason and would actually unfollow Giannis on Instagram as well as the Bucks fan page. But I'm sure the Bucks quickly got over it because from that point on, Giannis would go on to accomplish pretty much everything there is to accomplish and is no doubt a future first ballot Hall of Famer. This isn't exactly what Jabari envisioned when he was drafted number 2 by Milwaukee back in 2014. He never really reached his potential, while Giannis most certainly did, and then some. And lastly, we have an example where the main guy was actually more than happy to be demoted, if that's what it took to win. Before Tim Duncan arrived in San Antonio in 1997, David Robinson was their leading man. He led them to multiple 50-win seasons, and he also saw a ton of individual success as well, but would always come up short when it mattered most. Then, an injury had forced him to miss most of the 96-97 season, which opened the door for the Spurs to land Tim Duncan.
And then the very next year, we ended up getting the first. I got hurt. We had one of the worst records in the league, and we got the first pick in the draft.
Turns out, I was hurt that summer. I had the hernia, and then came back and broke my foot, and then ended up being out the whole season. And no way did I think we had a chance at getting him.
And right from the beginning, Robinson knew that Duncan was going to be special.
And I just remember thinking, man, this kid is really good. I was floored by how good he was, and I thought, okay, this kid's going to be a superstar right away.
And he was right, as Duncan didn't waste any time. He immediately showed everybody what he could do. According to former Spurs point guard Avery Johnson, the younger Duncan would dominate Robinson during practice. Quote, "We couldn't believe what we were seeing. Tim dominated David, who I thought was a pretty good defender. It got to the point where Popovich had David spend the rest of training camp on Tim's team. During the 98-99 season, the Spurs struggled early on, so Robinson had to make a difficult decision. He knew that in order for the team to succeed, he had to do the unselfish thing and take a back seat for the betterment of the team. Robinson said, "I figured I've got a shelf full of personal trophies, which ultimately don't mean anything. At first, you think you can get it done all by yourself, but then you realize you can't." And from that point on, Robinson didn't have to worry about doing most of the scoring anymore. He could finally just sit back and do other things, like concentrate more on rebounding and provide energy defensively, while Duncan became the #1 option. They would go 31-5 the rest of the season, and then would go on a 12-game winning streak in the playoffs, before ultimately winning the 1999 NBA championship, with Duncan being named Finals MVP. Something that probably wouldn't have happened if David Robinson wasn't willing to sacrifice in the first place by passing the torch to Duncan. They even won another title together in 2003 before Robinson retired. No wonder Robinson said this,